In today's notes, I've started to look at issues to do with culture or climate. And I've suggested that there are various aspects we need to look at. The first one is that the climate or the culture needs to take on board the demographic culture of the school. And also the political focus. There'll be things you'd be able to do in some schools that really would be taboo in others. Not that it's ever written down, it's just that all your colleagues would really frown on it very heavily. You know, things are often politically correct in a school or not. They might be appropriate in a particular time and so on. The second is that the climate needs to allow student input. I'm really wanting to argue that the student voice be there. I've actually elaborated all of these in the next few pages, and just over the next 10 minutes we'll go through these reasonably quickly, so you probably don't need to write anything down at this point. The third thing is that the climate needs to recognise that professional learning can follow a chaotic path. I'm going to unpack that. The idea that professional learning is associated with chaos. The fourth, that we've already suggested, is we need the opportunity for a systematic set of learning opportunities. And that's is already suggested over there. It's a very important point. It involves also the culture needs to value past experiences as a teacher. So if there's someone in the school of my age who's been around 1 or 2 years and my experiences might be slightly out of date, it needs to value those and try to help me to distill them to see the common patterns and how they relate to where we are now. The culture needs to allow us to think innovatively about possibilities and the discussing, the risk-taking, the debating, as James said, really relevant there. The collaboration. Who mentioned that? Someone mentioned that. The need for the sharing of knowledge and the collaboration. Acknowledging that people learn differently. Again, someone else mentioned that we will teach, how we'll teach will differ. Building relevant group knowledge, identifying how you went about learning, and then that last one about trust, as someone mentioned. The trust being critical for the climate. So as we're going through these, just think in terms of your school, on which of these might you need in your own way just to pull some levers? The first one was just the demographics. Now, I think that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to leave that. The business of having the student voice in there, I referred to this earlier today, and the issue is how do we get feedback from students? Not only their data, how they performed on that plan or whatever, but how do we get feedback from them about what they think about literacy, what they know about how to engage in literacy, the value of it, and whether or not they really want to learn to be literate. Because it's possible for a group of kids not to want to be literate, even though you as a teacher are putting in really great teaching for it. So having ways of taking on board the student voice. What's going to be your policy? What actions will you be taking to maximise the student voice? Now, we need to bear in mind, we really need to bear in mind that students may well need to learn how to do this. I remember at Wayne Craig's school, Box Hill Senior Secondary, Wayne, this would have been about, in the early 90s, he had a group of students trained for when new staff were going to be appointed, the students would be on the interview panel. The students would be involved in part in selecting new staff. And Wayne used to maintain consistently that the students asked much more probing questions than the other adults on the staff, and that generally what they thought turned out. He did this over 2 or 3 years. This was the early 90s, it would have been. Late 80s, early 90s. And I remember at the time, other people thought, oh, come on. And yet he got better staff through that. That's interesting, isn't it? This business of what do the students know? Now, they had to learn how to do it. Those of you who know Anna Vlas, Anna was his deputy principal, and Anna would remember this as well. So the students can be very insightful in what they give us back. I'm not so sure at the primary. I don't know enough about getting feedback at the primary. But at the secondary, I know they can be. So really looking at the student voice in all of this. I don't know about you guys. Go on, Mikhail, go on. It'd be good to get feedback from them. Particularly, you're not wanting them to do it cold without a bit of, without a bit of preparation. They need to know what it's about, and they need to have been talked through it. But it's interesting, how are the students going to give you feedback about, generally, like at the island, how literacy could be in there, or numeracy altogether? How it's going to fit in altogether. I can talk about that later.
Well, it generally manifests itself quite quickly whether they're going to take to it or not, because the experience, generally their experience with the whole literacy factor is so, there's they're hardwired in a very hostile way towards that process. So it's about scaling down to what is going back to their general knowledge and how you can do lots of it pretty much by stealth, and then get them actually proactively engaged in it, and then work towards building.
Yeah. And you do need to do that. You do, yeah. When I go into the uni today, there's going to be one of the teachers working with me, and a guy who's about 33, who we're helping to learn to read. And this guy can read in some ways, but he would have been like the sort of candidate who would have gone to the island. He had a really fractured, school